Dr. Long for strategic alignment. We've got Edward and Christina here, so we've got a lot of material to cover, so let me just plow right into it. I'll be following this agenda. We got bad weather coming in this weekend. Hope you guys are staying safe. This is a transition week for me. Our soccer team, I coach a traveling team for high school girls. We just finished up our tournament last week, did very well. It was a good end to our season, and I've handed them off back to their high school coaches, so now I've got some time on my hands. But now I get to enjoy the games from the sideline instead of suffering like the coach. I'm going to cover some open issues and words to the wise. We're doing pretty good so far. I'm going to just review in general the important themes that have typically come up in other courses. You guys are doing a good job of avoiding the minefields already, so we'll concentrate more on the positive things. I got a number of new materials to cover. It's going to be a lot of practical mental models and processes that can be used for your own business plan for IP5 if you want to use the optional assignment, or that you can use as a consultant to do executive coaching, so like organizational behavior, organizational development, or executive coaching for others as a consultant or a teacher. You can use this process that I'm going to talk you through tonight. It's also very effective to use as a consultant for helping other people develop their own strategic plan, and it's something that you can use in developing yourself and your own business planning or inside your own organization. It's going to show, I think, how a lot of different kinds of mental models can come together to help you with this process of strategic planning and strategic alignment, which gets us from matters of who we are and what we want in the future with details and specifics about how we're going to get there and how we're going to develop a plan that will improve our probabilities of success, whether that's on a personal or an organizational level. Okay. And then I'll have some things to say about IP number 5 as an option. Okay, so these are themes that I've had over the years and semesters with other classes, and I'll just comment about where I see us in this particular group. We're doing a great job with getting our length right. That when the assignment calls for 400 to 600 words, we're producing that much. That's 2 written pages. And then in our 100-word commentary with each other, you're giving them news that they can use. You're not just saying, hey, well done, I love what you did there, thanks for the effort. We're actually giving them something that improves their understanding of the material. Either it supplements or supports their position, or gives them some critical thinking about that position, to triangulate, to help them improve their understanding. So we're doing a great job of that. I'm going to talk about models, concepts, theories, and practice tonight. And it's intended not only to give you news that you can use, but to sort of demonstrate the point that what we're trying to get to is the development of the doctoral mind and the doctoral role. And that is that we can do all of these adjectives here at the bottom, that we can be systematic, thorough, transparent, contextual, scholarly, etc., and act with confidence, but within limits, so that the limits to our confidence are appropriate given the analysis and the evidence. Okay. Doing a good job, it seems to me, on all of the spelling and grammar pieces. So if you're not using Grammarly, you're just naturally a good writer, but if you are using Grammarly, it's helping. So I haven't really noticed any issues there worth mentioning. This next one is really a combination for you guys, but also the other course that we're about in the 8th week of that one, and we have a different textbook than you are using. And so one of the things that I have to constantly remind them to do when they're answering the DBs especially is that I want them to always incorporate what I call the Valakangas perspective in every assignment going forward. For us, that means using insights from our textbook to supplement the research and the analysis that we're doing. So it goes a little something like this, and it has something to do with the doctoral mind. And it was a topic that came up today in the classroom here at the military college. We're working through the details of strategic planning and operational planning for large organizations. And so these guys have been given a very difficult problem set to solve. And they're all contributing pieces of the plan from their areas of expertise. Like there are guys that are infantrymen and armor officers that are maneuver warriors, the guys who actually do the fighting directly. There's artillerymen that are providing long-range indirect supporting fires that help shape the battlefield. There's military police that are helping to control the roads and the lines of communication to ensure that supplies get through and that local populations are not disrupting that continuous supply. There are logisticians that are getting fuel and ammunition forward to the fighting units and then evacuating casualties to medical treatment. There are HR specialists that are ensuring that units are being maintained at the right level of personnel fill to compensate for the casualties that they're taking so they can still continue to perform their mission. They have communicators who are establishing digital and voice networks that allow us to do simultaneous command and control and bring the effects of different units together into one space and time. So that's hard to do. That strategic planning is hard to do. And just getting the friendly forces organized is hard. And then when you put a thinking enemy that's trying to kill you into the mix, it makes it a very competitive environment and a real challenge for planners. Well, to solve those problems then, what they find themselves doing is acting like hunters. How can I find my way through the swamp? How can I get through the maze and successfully get from where I am to where I want to be in the future? That, in a nutshell, is kind of the purpose of planning, is to be able to improve the probability of success at lowest cost, at least risk, and improve the odds of success. So it's not just random roll of the dice or coin flip, but I can start improving the possibilities of success. So the purpose of planning is to achieve those improvements in the outcomes, to improve our chance of success. That's why we plan instead of just going and acting. We think we can improve on random luck. Well, when you adopt that mindset of trying to find solutions in a world of complexity, you end up having to make assumptions along the way because you don't have enough facts to be able to definitively answer each question about would this work or could this work or what could go wrong. And in the absence of facts, you have to make some assumptions in order to continue with your reasoning chain that allows you to develop a solution. Well, if you spend 1 day or 2 days or 3 weeks in that kind of a mode and you end up with what you think is a reasonable plan, what that means is that you were able to make assumptions and combine them with facts and then found one pathway at least through all of the danger. And so then we think that it's going to work because we actually saw a way that it could work. Well, if you just stop there, then your plan is very vulnerable to that collection of assumptions that you made all along the way. So if we think of planning then as something like this little model, that we're over here on a cliff in the current state and we're trying to get across this chasm to the future state, and our facts will only take it like we're building a bridge and assembling facts. And if that's as far as our facts will take us, then how do we complete the argument to span the rest of the gap? Well, what we have to do is we have to start making assumptions about the world in order to complete the bridge. So that bridge is the cognitive architecture that allows us to get across and complete the connection. Now we have a bridge that's tied together, and now we can get from the current state to the future state. So if all we've ever done is adopt this hunter's mentality and try to find a problem-solving way to get through here, we will have constructed this plan and have a narrative of why it should work, and then we tend to believe that it ought to work. And so in order to, we take that, if we turn that into our plan, let's just say, we've now turned that theoretical argument, that cognitive effort, into a plan, and then we send that off into execution. Well, this is where plans fail, in execution. So what can we do here that once we have this plan that we can improve the probability of success going forward? So the Rand Corporation in the 90s came up with what they called assumptions-based planning. So this is an example of a model, a concept, or a theory and a practice that can be applied to whatever process you use to come up with your plan, to be systematic and thorough and rigorous and scholarly and practical about the components of that plan. So what we're going to view is each one of these assumptions as a piece of timber, and we're going to say, how important is that one timber to the overall structure of the argument? And so one of the things that we can do is, how much load will it bear? And it's almost like the game of Jenga. If I pull that assumption out, if I say, imagine that assumption failed, like it didn't come true. So I pull a stick of wood out of a Jenga stack. What's the overall effect on the integrity of that whole argument? If that bridge collapses because we remove that assumption, then we would say that's a critical point of failure, and that one is pretty darn important. It's a mission critical assumption. Well, you can start evaluating, you can create this 1 to n list of all your assumptions. You can say, how much weight is each one of these carrying? Is it a load-bearing member? Is it holding up the structure, or is it something that, even if it proves to be false, then it doesn't jeopardize overall success? Maybe it weakens it, but it doesn't make it automatically fail. So this process of assumptions-based planning allows us to inspect our planning effort like a hunter, only in this case, instead of looking for reasons why it would succeed, we're looking for reasons why it would fail. And out of that kind of pre-mortem analysis, we can find ways to improve the argument. We might find ways to turn the assumptions into facts. We might use this 1 to n list of importance and then get some intelligence assets that will allow us to turn the assumption into a fact, and then we can have greater certainty about the structural integrity of our argument, or of our business plan, or of our strategic plan. And we realize that it takes time and money, and that there are limits on how many of those assets that we have. So it's an asset, and it represents time and money. So we have a certain amount of capital that we can spend on collecting intelligence or information that allows us to turn assumptions into facts. So rather than just spreading out our capital on every possible assumption, we do this assumptions-based planning in order to figure out which assumption is the one that is most important, and then let's try to convert that to a fact. Okay? So assumptions-based planning then is one technique that we might use, a model or a concept or a theory or a practice, that allows us to take the strategic plan, do a little critical and creative thinking, and then add value by doing that, And so we can improve the probability of execution, that our success rate goes up compared to just implementing the plan without further analysis. So the purpose then of the doctoral mind and the role of the doctoral mind is to ensure that we're doing all of these adjectives as a way to improve on the naive assumption that random decisions are going to help us. So that's one way that we can improve our practice, or we can improve our results, is by being systematic and rigorous about the planning. Well, there's other things that we can do too. That once we get into the execution phase, that the way in which we conduct our daily operations, the tactical decision making that we do, can lead to success if we see the connection between the decisions we make day to day and the long-term solution. So instead of looking at decisions as just a series of independent small-scale decisions, we can realize that the way that we solve those and the outcomes that we get can be linked together with kind of like themes or standard practices, or an approach that looks to add value, so that the way in which we conduct the decision or we implement our actions can actually be aligned with our long-term values and our future state. So not only can we improve the way we plan, and that we can do assumptions-based planning to improve the plan itself, we can actually look at the way we conduct operations or put that operation into action as a way to strengthen our capabilities and improve our future possibilities. So it's like working out. The way that I organize my exercises can make me stronger for how I exercise tomorrow, and then how I can play tomorrow. So really good teams in sports are not only just coming up with strategies about how to play, but they're conducting focused practices on the important aspects of performance that allow them to improve their overall success rate. So when I'm putting together a strategic plan and looking for strategic alignment, I'm not just looking at current state and future state and figuring out how I get there, but I'm also concerned about strengthening my plan by looking at the assumptions, and I'm going to strengthen my plan for implementation, and I'm going to strengthen my daily operations routine so that the decisions I make and the processes I use make me a better organization. So I'm going to develop a culture of continuous improvement. Well, all of those things can be rolled into components of your strategic plan, which is not just a description of where you want to go, but also how you're going to get there and the means by which we improve along the way. If you put all of those little best practices and standing operating procedures into a vision statement or an identity book, that might become your culture or the way that you do business around here. And that's one of the strengths of very good organizations, is that they have a culture that embraces this learning organization style, that we're going to learn how to get better by studying the things that we do. That's where the world of practical action research comes into play, so that we look at all the things that we do not only as problem solving, but as opportunities to research into better practices. And so action research and action learning become a very practical way to improve an already good plan. And by enlisting the people that are engaged in making those decisions into the development of the plan and the construction of our culture, we can do the things as an organization that will improve our performance overall. Well, why do I say all of that stuff? Well, I'm saying all that stuff because when we look at these individual tools that are presented to us in the textbook and in the assignments, we can lose sight of the fact that they are simply one element of a much larger tapestry of who we are and what we do and how we do it. Okay? So I say all that because now I want to talk about an option that you have for the final IP, or IP number 5. Now, you don't have to take this option, but I'm going to encourage you to do it, or at least give you the argument why you should consider it. So what we're going to do in IPs number 1 through 4, IP 1 through 4, and then all the DBs in those mods are really designed to teach you little pieces and parts, elements of, or tools in the strategic planning and strategic alignment toolbox. So you have all of those things. IP number 5 is where you get another chance to pull all that stuff together and pull those pieces together into a little case study analysis where you develop for one organization a large-scale strategic plan that incorporates many of these individual tasks that you developed in modules or units 1 through 4. Well, as a result of doing all of these little modules, you may already feel comfortable that you know how to do those things, and you may make a decision that says, you know, I'm really not going to add much more value to my own capabilities by simply repeating this in a large organization and doing it once more. What I'm going to give you, and that assignment, the standard assignment calls for about 15 to 20 pages applied to a large corporation where you put together a strategic plan that includes implementation. What I'm going to suggest that you can do, and you should consider, is about a 12 to 15 page effort that is a personal strategic plan. And here's the reasons why I think that will be valuable. First, I know from direct experience that when I was in the program, and there were something like 12 courses and all that, and I went in with the certain ideas of what I wanted to get out of the program and why I was doing it. And then as I got in, you know, who I was as a person and maybe some of my goals and objectives changed. And one of the things that really happened me was that I imagined where I was going to be 5 years after graduation. And there were many different places I could be. And so I went through a series of focusing questions about who I am and what I wanted to achieve and how I was going to get there. And that helped me clarify where I wanted to be 5 years after graduation. So this became who I was in my current state, and this was my future state of where I wanted to be 5 years after. And there's a lot of different places you could be. You could be a teacher, you could be a consultant, you could be a business owner, you could be a CEO of a business, you could be a director of a department in a business, you could be responsible for personnel development of individuals, you could be a consultant to executives, you could be a consultant to businesses, you could be part of a consulting team, you could be a tool maker who develops tools that other consultants can use. So there's a lot of different future states. You could be a mix of all those things. You could just be, hey, I'm going to apply these ideas to be a better executive myself and just work on my own professional development. So there's 7 or 8 different ways in which that you might choose to apply the insights from all of these lessons. So deciding who I wanted to be 5 years after graduation allowed me to then reverse engineer to say, what can I do in each of the lessons and along the way to build up the skill sets so that once I graduated, I could have this career path, maybe multiple pathways, but multiple ways of getting to where I wanted to be in 5 years. And then when the going got tough in some of these classes, and sometimes it does, I had something that was pulling me forward, as well as my intrinsic motivation for getting done. I had things pushing me, and I had things pulling me through, and it helped me with my overall success rate. And then everybody that was in my cohort that adopted this strategy ended up with a successful career. Now, when we started, we had 30 people in our cohort. 5 of us graduated and completed. Every one of us adopted this forward-looking 5-year plan and found it to be a very powerful tool to help us get through where other people maybe couldn't get through. Because it was so powerful me that I've been using this with all my classes that I teach at Colorado Tech. I use it to help advise on the military careers of the officers that I teach. And I use this strategy with all my executive coaching clients as a consultant. And I use this as an organizational design consultant. So when the guys are trying to put together a business plan, I use these same kinds of focusing questions and these various mental models to help them develop an organizational business plan. Well, the moment of Zen was, this moment of insight was, that if you look at yourself as a business, then you can conduct the strategic planning and analysis that we're learning to do in this course and apply it to yourself. And then you will have a couple things going for you. Number one, you will have direct experience of what it's like trying to do these things. So if you're a teacher or a consultant, you can have some empathy for your client. You can help them understand what it's like. You can share that experience with them, and it will make you more effective as a teacher and a consultant because you've been there and done that, and you know what to expect, and you will have some practical experience to go along with the theoretical insights that you gain. So that's why I want to share this with you. It's not just a technique that you can use for this course to add value, but it's something that you can actively incorporate into your professional practice, either on an individual level or as an individual consultant and teacher, or as an organizational consultant and teacher. That what it really comes down to is that the principles of organizational development work for you as an individual as well. So that's why this is a high payoff. So all my coaching clients start off with a personal exploration of their own psychology and where they are in the world that helps me understand who they are as people or as organizations, and then the possible future states. And then when I get down to the bottom pieces here, I'm actually incorporating some elements of emotional intelligence as well. So you might notice that things like in the second block are going to be all the pieces of mental models and processes and theories that we're going to use to take the raw material that comes out of block number one. We're going to carry that into block number two and then pick these different analytical lenses or processes and turn that raw material into finished product. So the finished product that I'm going to recommend that you look at for IP number 5 has 3 elements, 12 to 15 pages. A business plan, an action plan of how you're going to get there, and then one PowerPoint slide that represents your 5-minute elevator speech that would tell Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or an angel investor or a client why they should invest in you. You're asking people to invest in you and your ideas. Why should they do that? Well, you got about 5 minutes to convince them why that's a good deal, why that's a good bet. So the work that you put into the detailed work and the due diligence on the business plan and the action plan is the detailed rational planning. But the elevator speech is the artful communication that inspires confidence in them, that helps them decide to take the risk to invest in the details of your business plan and action plan. So if I got a guy who can't give me a 5-minute explanation of why he's a good bet, then I don't care how good his business plan is. He is not convincing me that he's even confident enough to be able to make that case. You got to be able to make that sale. So think of your elevator speech as the capstone persuasive argument, that heart-to-heart summary of why you're going to succeed. Well, if you look at this set of questions here, they are organized in that way for a very particular reason. How am I going to measure my progress so an independent observer could actually audit me? Why will I succeed? This is really connected to the business plan and the action plan. That's the rational explanation of the SWOT model and the business planning and all that stuff. That's the rational reasons why. Why do I want to succeed? Now I'm starting to get to the emotional connection. What is my commitment to this? What am I going to do when it gets hard? Do I have to succeed? What's compelling me to keep going when it gets tough? Or am I going to quit as soon as it gets tough? Why do I want to succeed? Why do I have to succeed? Where is the skin in the game? And then what difference will my success make in the world? What is my commitment to others? What is my legacy? Why do I have this level of commitment? What you'll see is that this is a progression that goes from your rational mind down to the very essence of your identity and talks about why this must succeed. You have to be able to be convincing on that level if you're going to get people to invest their time and attention and money and their success in what it is that you're offering, whether that's advice or whether it's an opportunity to invest in your company or whether you want them to join your team. So the elevator speech is the final piece of this puzzle. And so that's the reason that you invest the time and effort in really exploring your inner space or your organization's identity. And then you apply the due diligence of all these mental models that allow you to craft, at the end of the day, these outputs, the business plan, action plan, and the elevator speech. So is that making sense so far? Okay, good. So now let me say, I wonder if there's some easy way to erase all these things. I hope so. I've talked a little bit about design thinking already and systems thinking. And so what I want to do, without going through each and every, and I did talk extensively already about the assumptions-based planning, and you've heard my little speech already on visualizing success. I'm going to show some slides that talk about other elements of these mental models in the middle. I think of these as the transitional steps that allow you to process the raw material into final product. Okay? So here we go. So the design thinking piece that I talked about looks very much like that list of questions. You start with an environmental frame that describes the world around you and where we are, and then where you want to go and why. And then the problem frame is what you develop that says, well, why can't I get there? What's stopping me? So let's look at this model as a way to explain what happens in design thinking. If it were really easy, you could just go from point A to point B. But on really complicated or complex problems, things develop. You get this obstacle. So you tried to go here and you hit that obstacle and it stopped you. And they say, well, let me try something to bypass that. So you come down this path blue and boom, you hit the second obstacle. And then you develop your plan further and boom, there's a third obstacle. Well, when you start seeing all those things come together, you start doing problem analysis and say, hey, maybe there's some kind of root cause or a problem over here that's generating all of these obstacles to the simple and routine ways of getting it solved. So once you study that problem, you say, to solve that kind of a problem, I need this kind of an approach. And maybe now when you develop that, you come up with a way, now it looks like I can get around that problem or solve that problem. I now have an operational approach that I can then turn into a detailed plan to get from point A to point B. And maybe I do that inside the boundaries of this environment. Well, as you develop that, you might say, hey, circumstances could occur that if I wanted to go to C instead of B, like maybe shoot for more, as a result of this, I see another opportunity, you might decide that in order to go to C, all I have to do is expand the scope of my environment, and now it becomes realistic to go to C. Or you may say, hey, let me go to B, and then if that works, then I can go to C. So I might do it in 2 steps, or I might just expand my environment and do it in one big, bold move. So you actually get in your plan to define what the limits of your environment are. And by changing the environment, you may be able to develop more opportunities to get radical transformational change. So just realize that the problem frame, the environmental frame, the future states, all of those are choices that you get to make prior to developing the detailed implementation plan. So that's what I mean by this mental model of design thinking. It's a way to go from the current state to the end state and account for things. So this mental model here takes a look then at strategy and tactics as the way that you bridge the gap from the means at your disposal in your current state to your end state. It's how you get across. And now that assumptions-based planning allows us to think of the strategy and tactics not as a fait accompli, but really as a collection of facts and assumptions and processes that can then be systematically explored. Well, once you put that plan into action, you could adopt something like the El Paso model, which is a version of an action research, which says that you have an endless loop or iterations of people, actions, situations, and outcomes, that your people and their capacities take certain actions. They make decisions to take certain actions in a situation in order to achieve outcomes that hopefully are adding value, and that if we do those in a systematic way and get better and better, that we're going to do better than people that just muck around and just muddle through. But if we can actually learn to get better and apply those insights going forward, we can actually accelerate our improvements, and we can have a commitment to continuous improvement so that as we do things, we get better at achieving our goals. So if I have a culture and a set of processes that allow me to learn, and if I align my daily tactical actions with my strategic goals, I have the possibility of making this kind of improvement. So your action plan may actually include some of those things about how to do assumptions-based planning or an improved operations at work. I might adopt this approach to systems thinking, which says, if I consider myself as a system that has inputs, process, and output, and with the control mechanisms that allow me to check my quality, I can improve the way I add value to my inputs so that I have better outputs, and I can, if I have organizational boundaries here, I might have a quality control and checkpoint here that says, let me inspect the quality of my inputs, my sources of supply, so that I start with better raw materials so that my output is going to be better. And then let me do inspections to ensure that the product that I ship forward meets the specifications of my customers so that I can improve constantly the way I do business and how I do business. So a systems thinking approach, a continuous improvement approach, a Lean Six Sigma approach with quality circles and a learning organization might take my strategic plan, and simply on the basis of how I do business, I can improve my chances for success. I might take a model, a 2x2 model like this, and says, once I've made a listing of all the actions that I can take, I can classify them into one of four categories. I can say, do I already have it and do I want it? So things that I want and that I already have is a type 2 category, and so I can come up with a strategy for how to preserve my strengths. So you can see the connection already to a SWOT model, which says, how do I act on the analysis that I conducted with my SWOT? So I can start blending these models together. If I want it, but I don't already have it, then I need a strategy that allows me to achieve it reliably and at good cost with low risk. If I don't want it and I don't have it, then my strategy is to avoid it. So I need a strategy that allows me to bypass it so it doesn't come into my organization. Preventive medicine. If I don't want it, but I already have it, then maybe like improving my workforce or upgrading our standards, I can learn to eliminate the weaknesses or the things that aren't adding value. So I can take this list of good things to do that came out of my business analysis, and then by applying this particular model, I can classify it by the kind of problem I'm trying to solve, and then I can come up with a strategy for action that is tuned to the kind of a problem it is. I might use something like the Kotter change model. So Kotter's change model is where he studied a couple hundred organizations that all had good strategic plans. Check, they have a good strategic plan, but they could not successfully achieve their future state, so they failed. Well, why did they fail? And why did some units or organizations achieve it, but 70% of organizations failed in practice? Well, he studied the things that made you successful or prevented failure and said, if you do these 8 things and incorporate that into how you implement your plan, you're going to do a better job of succeeding. So it's not just coming up with the strategic plan, it's learning to implement it in a way that will add value so that you can get to your future state at a greater degree of probability. So the implementation plan should actually be part of your strategic plan. If we look to the East and the world of the Buddha, and they're looking at personal transformation, that if you apply the principles of the Eightfold Path, then you will improve your mindset that helps you achieve your personal growth objectives. You could do the equivalent of this for the organizational behavior and say that we're going to follow these kinds of principles in the way we do business so that we will be virtuous and that we will be better at the personal and organizational level with how we treat each other and how we treat our clients, in order to we can make sure that we really understand ourselves and our environment and our customers, that we're using good thought patterns and analysis, that we are honorable and respectful in the way we speak to each other, and that we take good actions, and that we are engaged in meaningful, positive things that add value to society, and that our effort is good and noble and proper and ethical, and that we are aware of the risks and that we take care of our people and we seek to do no harm, and that we are focused on our task at hand to add quality to everything that we do. And if we do all those things as people and as organizations, we can improve the way we implement the Kotter model, the way we implement the strategic plan. So it's not just deciding what to do, it's how we do it that can also make a difference. You may apply the principles of the 10 ox herding pictures from the world of Zen Buddhism. That this maps the pathway to personal mastery. And so the Zen Buddhists think of the conscious mind as this rampaging bull that just runs amok. Well, how do we discipline that? Well, they talk about these 10 different stages that people typically go through when they're trying to bring themselves under control, to be mindful and masters of self, to live intentionally. Well, not only is this one of the ways that you can use to develop yourself, but it's a way that you can look to the organizational mindset and organizational mindfulness and organize the way we do our processes to ensure that we account for human nature in the conduct of our daily business. So all of these 3 things are mental models that can be used to improve the probability of success of our strategic plan that I would share with you. In terms of global environmental success, if you're going to do global business with a culture that has a strong connection to Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, then understanding how those individuals might view proper thinking and behaving in the marketplace will help you develop plans that account for their perspectives. So you can do well by doing good. Those are things that I use, by the way, with my clients to help them understand who they are and maybe consider reinventing themselves. Well, once we've decided on those list of things that we're going to decide to do, and remember, if you think about that quadrant, things that we want to preserve, avoid, achieve, and so forth, we might also say, well, what am I actually trying to do? What does that better end state look like? If all I'm trying to do is repair, then I'm just trying to put things back the way they were. So I identify a symptom, I treat it, I troubleshoot what went wrong, and I restore the quality of the past. And I may end up, you don't have to, but you may find yourself in the political game of saying, who's to blame and why this thing that worked in the past is failure? It's very easy to fall into the blame game. Or you might say, no, what we're trying to do is some process improvement, so we're going to improve the existing arrangement, maybe Lean Six Sigma or statistical process control. So try to find efficiencies and through analysis and quality circles or Kaizen. But we may also elect a solution engineering approach, which is using design thinking to create new ways altogether of doing things that look at the end results and a fresh approach. And so we might use design thinking rather than analysis or troubleshooting like I already described. And it's going to feature innovation as the engine of change and the political challenge to overcome. So recognize that when we make our strategic plan and we have multiple options about what to do, it'll often fall into different categories of actions based on what your purpose and your goals and your sense of what's realistic can be. So realize that's an important part of the decisions you make. I talked a little bit about this already, that if we have a plan, somebody has to implement that day to day. So all of these little steps that we make along the path come into this category. Like, hey, a problem just emerged. Do we have time to react to it? No. Can we take a quick action? No. Then we're just going to take a fight or flight. We're going to do a knee-jerk reaction without thinking. Well, that's bad. What we actually want is a planning process and an implementation plan and a management system that creates warnings that give us the time to actually think our way through things so that we can take near-term actions. If there's not a lot of time to develop, we can have planned out ahead of time some near-term actions, some tactical actions. But if there's time to develop, we might have an operational level or a strategic level of response, because our early warning system and our strategy created the time available to really help us achieve long-term effects when the environment changes. And that's how you get long-term success rather than a series of little tactical fight or flight emotional responses. Learning organizations use planning to create the time and space in order to develop a better response to environmental change. So that's the purpose of planning, is to come up with time and options, and then strategy. The role of strategy is to link those together so that we have a series of events that give us incremental advantage. That's a learning organization. So this one describes in a formal way the assumptions-based planning process I talked about earlier. So just as a quick review, we might use assumptions-based planning so that when we put things into action, that we have improved the plan as much as possible. So we conduct in step one, we conduct our planning in the usual way. But then step one, identify the important assumptions, figure out which assumptions make us vulnerable, then establish early warning to the ones that are the most important, that we then develop options in case of warning, and that we can take actions to hedge against those problems to reduce the probability of that critical event occurring. And so we use this to come back and improve our initial plan. So this comes out of Rand work in the 1990s. That these are things they learned on how to improve things at the strategic national level that we can apply in our own planning. So if I think of that third step of solution engineering, I might do something like use the investigation process to answer these kinds of questions. These are the ones, if you think about that block one, they had all those raw material questions. Those are the kinds of things that you do to specify results, look at the right structure, map it, look for ways to improve it. So I'm turning those things into structure in my investigation. And then in the intervention phase, I'm looking at how to apply it. I'm looking at how I turn that stuff into effective action. And then we go through this process of investigate and intervene. This is the action research cycle, or that El Paso model. So we can see the solution engineering process not as a one-off design thing, but as a part of a continuous learning environment that allows us to sense and respond to a changing environment and always get better. I'm not going to, because we're already at 55 minutes here, I mean, I owe you guys some time off. Well, part of that same Rand study looked at the lessons that they learned from studying many different strategic planning processes. So I'm just going to list them here for you to review, and I'm going to talk about these next week. And so what I wanted to do then is come back to this initial model, and simply summarize by saying what we have here is sort of a general purpose robust process where we can start this design thinking by discovering who we are or who our organization is. And these are all the things that we ask people to do in their strategic planning and their visioning. And then our job as the doctors is to take that raw material and help them pick the right models to start classifying and analyzing and sense making, with the idea of producing these robust plans that can actually be implemented, and then implemented in a way that will add to our excellence as we go. So I say all that simply to say that I want you to have this kind of mindset in your head as you go through this course, looking at the different tools that we're learning about and that we can implement. And then consider, you know, the personal value add of thinking in this way. You can already start working on IP5 now, and then pick up the pieces of the models that come out of the IPs and the DBs. But a lot of this stuff you can already start to construct if you decide to go the route of the individual assignment. So next week I'm going to give you an example of what maybe that 12 to 15 pages might look like. But if you start thinking in these ways, if you feel hungry to do that, then you can already start developing your thoughts and reflections on some of these. But at a minimum, these are things that I'd like you to think about when we learn these different tools towards applying them to businesses. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to cover tonight. The recording will be available to you in about probably 20 or 30 minutes. The slides are uploaded into IP number 2, Unit 2 in the Learning Resource Library. So I would recommend you go get those and get a clean copy and use that to reflect on this week's discussions. Okay. So any final questions before we call it a night? Thanks, Edward. Same for you. Christina, everything okay there? Very good. Okay, take good care, guys. Be safe. We got some bad weather rolling in, so you guys make sure that you're safe. Keep up the great work. You're off to such a great start that I just know you guys are going to continue to be great